So these videos are all going to be about programming concepts, and this is going to be the first one about event-driven programming. And basically, event-driven programming works like this. It's when events happen and a program responds. So it's really not a programming concept as much as it is a whole programming method. That we have events that happen, programs respond to those. So this is the basics of what GameMaker does. GameMaker uses event-driven programming. We have objects that have events, and then we program the object to respond to those events in certain ways depending on what is required for our game. So could be having the user control a character in the game. It could also be interactions between objects. Those are two common things that we use event-driven programming for. There's plenty of other things that can happen as well. But these are kind of the two of the main ones. User controlling a character, interactions between objects. So in GameMaker 2, the way we program using event-driven programming is we got to create a sprite first. The sprite is the picture that is going to appear on screen. So if we're going to have a picture or have the element appear on screen, then we have to have a picture, and the picture is called a sprite. Once we've created a sprite, then we can create an object to represent that element, and then we assign the sprite to that object. That way they're linked. We can see the object on screen because it's got a sprite. And then we can add an event. In the object, when we add an event for a specific thing. So could be a variety of things: creating the object, pushing a key, clicking the mouse, etc. We add that event, and then we add actions for the event to respond to the action or to the event when it happens. So, for instance, if it's a key press and we're wanting to do movement, if a right key is pressed, then we want to move to the right. And so we have to add the code that moves to the right, etc. So then we can continue this process and this cycle as much as we need. So we can go back to creating another sprite for a new object, create a new object, and then start adding events for that. Or we can simply go back to adding events in the current object and adding all the events we need for that object. Then we can move on to a new object. As an example, we're going to talk about controlling an object. And in games, we want to usually give the player control of something. So when we control an object, we move using the keyboard inputs. So and those inputs are usually arrow keys. So when we press arrow keys, we want to move up, down, left, and right. There are multiple keyboard events that we should be aware of when it comes to pressing keys on the keyboard. And the one we choose depends upon the situation we need it for and what we need in our game. So there's the key down event, which is triggers when you press and hold a key. This is good for lots of movement because you can move left and right, because usually you hold down the key when you move left and right. So key down events are good for pressing and holding keys. Key press event, on the other hand, only triggers when the key is pressed. So as soon as you press it, it's going to trigger, and then it's going to stop triggering after that. So as soon as the key is all the way down, it triggers, and then it's done. This is good for when you want to press a button to start something, and then you don't want it to respond again. Key up event, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. It's when it's released. So the key has gone down, and then it gets released. And when it gets released, at that moment, the key up event triggers, and then it doesn't trigger anymore. So it's very similar to the key press event. The difference is it's when the key is released from being pressed. In our example, and in most cases, we're going to be using the key down event because we want to press and hold to move. If we want to press and hold to move, then we want the key down event. And it's not just one key down event. We need a key down event for each of the arrows because the key down event is specific to a key on the keyboard. So when we have a key down event, we say, okay, I want a key down for right, a key down for left, a key down for up, a key down for down. And then we get a program what happens with each one of those depending on what is required in our game. So we're now going to switch over to GameMaker and actually see what this looks like in practice. So the first thing, of course, we need is a sprite, and we're going to give it a name. I'm going to borrow a sprite from our Maze Chase game just as an example. So we're going to import the smiley sprite into this sprite. We're going to change its origin to middle center, because usually when I'm controlling something, I'm controlling based on its center, not based on any other part. Makes more sense to the player when they're moving, but they understand that when they're moving the object's center, not the outside of it. Okay, now I'm going to add the object and create an object to move. We're going to select the sprite, and then we're going to go ahead and start adding events. When we add our key down event, you'll notice there's all those options. As I said, there's the arrow keys, there's the special keys, there's the keypad, there's digits, there's letters, there's the function keys, other keys. Any key on the keyboard that you can use, that you can press, you can use for something in your game. In this case, we're going to start with a key down left. And the key down left, I want to move left when that happens. Now, in computers, the way we do coordinates is similar to how we do in math. We still use X and Y coordinates to represent points on the screen. The difference is that instead of having an origin either in the middle or in the lower left, our origin is up here in the upper left. So it's 0, 0 is up here. It means that everything on the screen, it has positive coordinates, which is good news. But it also means that because we're in the upper left, the Y values are essentially flipped. Lower values are at the top, higher values are at the bottom. So it's something to get used to, that we want to move up, and in order to move up and down, we have to flip our thinking in that way. X works just like in math. Left is lower values, right is higher values. And the way we think about moving, and one easy way to think about moving is to change the X coordinate of my object. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use this assign variable block, and I'm going to zoom in on that so we can see it real clearly. So the assign variable block allows you to change the value of a variable. We're going to be dealing with a variable that's part of every object called X, just the X coordinate of the variable. And I'm going to assign the value -4, and you see up here it says set X to -4, which means I would be replacing whatever value there is in that variable with a -4. That's not what I want to do, though. I want to change the X coordinate to 4 less than what it was, which means I'm going to click the relative box. The relative box changes it from replacing the value to adding that value to the current value of X. So this changes up here to say add -4 to X, which should move my character 4 pixels to the left. Now if I do a second event, that is a key down event, and I'm going to add the key down right, and I'm going to grab another assigned variable and zoom in. This time around, I'm still going to use X, but I'm going to change the value to 4 instead of -4, and then click relative. So the two events, key down left, key down right, look very similar. Key down left uses X, but uses a value of -4. Key down right uses X, but uses a value of 4. Both of them have the relative box checked. And when we move, that's typically how we move, is by using the relative box and using the variable. When I move up and down, I'm going to change both the variable I use, because instead of using X, we're going to use Y. But when I move up, remember, up is less, so I have to subtract. So I'm going to use a -4 and click the relative box for key down up, and then I'm going to do a key down down, add the assigned variable, change that variable to a y, change this to a +4, click the relative box there. So now I have 4 different events, one for each of the arrow keys. Left key, right key, up key, down key. Left is take add -4 to x. Right key is add 4 to x. Up key is add -4 to y, and down key is add 4 to y. So now I need to go into my room and add my object. And I'm just going to add the object for now. Usually you'll want to reset your room to whatever size room you need for your game. But just as a demonstration, we're going to go ahead and add the object to the room. I'm going to click Run in order to move the object around. And then we're going to see that the object moves around like we want to. So it's moving around up, down, left, right. And you'll notice also, because there's 4 separate events, that means I can also have those events trigger at the same time. So if I press left and right at the same time, it actually equals out and I don't see any change. And same thing if I press up and down together. But if I press up and right together, then I move up and to the right. If I press down and right, I move down and to the right. So events can trigger at the same time. If they oppose each other, then it looks like nothing happens. But if they don't, then both of those things can happen. And so you can get pretty interesting movement if you want. So that's it for this video. I hope you'll find that useful and watch some more.